Now, flight operations are expected to start on June 21st, with a caveat for airlines to reduce capacity from 50 to 70% of load factor. Now, according to the Federal Airports Authority FAN of Nigeria, 45% increase in airfares will be charged by airlines when flight operations resume at the nation's airports. Now, FAN said the International Air Transport Association has already notified it about the increase just as it prepares for reopening of the airports. The General Manager, Corporate Affairs of FAN, Mrs. Henrietta Yakubu, who disclosed this, said air passengers should also expect delays and long hours of checks and rechecks right from when they arrive the airports and depart. Meanwhile, preparations are in top gear ahead of the resumption of flight operations at the Port Harcourt International Airport. Correspondent Uche Okoro takes it from here.
Normal activities in the aviation sector ground to a halt on the 23rd of March. Since then, international and local flights have been limited to essential services. But after a review of the coronavirus pandemic, government says commercial flights of the Port Harcourt International Airport and 4 others in the country can now resume. Safety, however, remains top priority amidst efforts to get the economy back on track.
We are doing a new SOP to ensure that the safety of our staff, the safety of passengers, the safety of other stakeholders in the airport. And one thing we intend to do also, based on our headquarters directive, and I'm sure other airports are meant to work in that capacity also in that direction. We are meant to prepare a canopy before the terminal building, whereby some processing will be done before such passenger will get to the terminal building, to ensure that whosoever is getting to the terminal building, to the best of our judgment, they are free to fly.
Ahead of the resumption date of 21st of June, the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria is expected to release an updated standard operating procedure to reflect the current reality. The document will not just regulate activities of the airport, but also that of the airlines.
The fly public, I'm sure they are hungry to fly, but at the same time too, I can tell them that the airport is safe, and by extension, the aircraft too is safe to fly. Otherwise, the regulator will not give us a clean bill to operate, because this is a highly regulated industry.
New social distancing measures at the airport include floor markings indicating where passengers are to stand while on a queue. A new seating arrangement has also been put in place to create spaces between passengers at the waiting lounge. The federal government says it is time to reopen the airport, and the airport authorities say they are ready to comply. But the question is, how safe do prospective passengers feel to board the plane again? We'll see in just a few weeks' time. Uche Okoro, TVC News, Port Harcourt.
Right now, aviation analyst Wole Shadari, he now joins me via Skype from Ikeja to talk more on this. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Shadari.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the 7th of June means a big meeting is going to take place where Nigerian government is going to review aviation protocols vis-a-vis shutting down and reopening airports in the wake of COVID-19. Now, what do you think is likely to happen if we are looking at the 21st of June as the earliest date for the airports to open?
Thank you very much. If you look at what the statement the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority released 2 days ago, it's underlined a lot of guidelines that the airlines need to follow to ensure that once they meet up with these guidelines, they will be able to take these guidelines to them and say they are ready to open. But I've discussed with some of the airlines, and they've shown capacity, and they have shown preparedness to ensure that they meet up with those guidelines. But it also remains to be seen how far they can go to meet up with those guidelines, because the guidelines are quite huge, because most of them have their aircraft on ground for close to 2-3 months now, and they just can't pick the aircraft and say they want to start flying. They need to do certain checks. They need to do from A to B to C checks. They also need to do a lot of things like simulator. They also need to make sure that the licenses of their pilots, cabin crew, they are very, very current, because within that period, a lot of things have happened. So they need to get currency. They also need to ensure that they meet up, like I said, meet up with the guidelines of the NCAA. So it's a tough one, but I see them, racing against time to make sure that they meet with all these guidelines. It's quite Herculean, and we see how they go about it.
Indeed, it's not easy task at all ahead of them. We have been told that 5 airports are going to open: Lagos,
Yes.
Abuja, Port Harcourt, Kano, and Owerri. Now, let's now look at how ready they are again, considering our large numbers, to ensure that there is a seamless operations at those airports.
I think a lot of people have questioned why federal government decided to open just 5 airports and not the entire airport. And I asked myself, what are the things we have put in place to ensure that these airports are open? And the government has, in its wisdom, has said, okay, let us test run and see how these airports are going to cope with all this. And you begin to ask yourself, how far has SAN gone to ensure that all the necessary things that we need to do to ensure that coronavirus, we don't continue to spread coronavirus around the airports, are done? Just tomorrow, the Ministry of Environment is going to disinfect most of the aircraft, and it's going to take a while before they do it. Like I told you, there's a guideline they need to follow to ensure that they meet up with the June 21st date. So it's going to be Herculean, and that is why government has said, okay, let us even start with these 5 airports, and these 5 airports are cut across the 5 geopolitical zones of the country, the ones in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, Port Harcourt, and Owerri. So, and you ask yourself, where are people likely to go when flights resume? It's going to be into these 5 airports, basically. And if we succeed and look at the way we're able to do this, the government can now decide to say, okay, we are going to open 3 or 4 more airports, or we throw the whole airports open. But at the same time, do we even have capacity to man these airports as the way they are today? Because if you look at it, most of these airports have been shut for past 2-3 months. So it takes a lot for them to begin to say, okay, we want to put things in place, we want to put all the necessary things in place. I think government has done well by saying, we want to open these 5 airports to test run what we have with domestic airlines before they can begin to look at opening the airports for international operations.
Indeed. Now, something that is also of concern to a lot of Nigerians, and especially regards to our topic, is the air traveling public, is the durability of aircraft. We know that aircraft needs to be flown around the clock.
Absolutely.
You also acceded to that fact that a lot of them have been parked for months and weeks on end. Are there going to be protocols to certify those aircrafts fit before they fly? When we open the airports and indeed start putting passengers on those commercial flights?
Absolutely. That is what you have with the regulation that the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority has given to all the airlines. They need to recertify the aircraft. They need to re-audit them. You just can't put aircraft on ground and say you want to just take the aircraft and move from point A to point B. They have to be certified. And like we said, there are no parking space up there. So you need to do all the necessary things you need to do. Aircraft are very sensitive equipment that they need to be flown at all times. Anytime you see an aircraft that is not flown for a long period, definitely something is wrong with it. Aircraft are meant to be flown at every point in time. So if you have parked your aircraft, so you still need to go through the certification. And you also ask yourself, the airlines are running out of cash. The airlines, most of them have actually run out of money, because during this COVID-19, they didn't make revenue, but they were spending money. They were burning cash. So it takes a lot of money to put these aircraft in proper shape for them to be flown again. And mind you, before an aircraft is allowed to be flown out of Nigeria or anywhere in the world, they must be certified. Aviation industry is highly regulated. It's not like any other sector, because you know that any little thing, is going to cost lives. So the NCAA is on top of its game. We just look at the airlines to see how they can meet up with this protocol. And I assure you, I don't think all the airlines will come back. Even if they come back, it might not take long before some of them will throw in the towel. The signs are there. The signs are visible. Only the fittest will survive the industry post-COVID-19.
Indeed. Let's now look at airlines around the world. British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, some gone into receivership, and some asking for government intervention and subventions. Now, what would you say is the future of Nigerian straddling aviation business? Now, do you see government wanting to pump in any emergency funding into that sector at this time?
To tell you the fact, Nigerian airlines are very, very weak. They are very small and fragmented. Even before COVID, a lot of them were already showing signs of they were not healthy. They were not healthy in the sense that they were finding it difficult to operate. With COVID-19, that has compounded the problems of the airline, not only in Nigeria, but globally. You see a big airline like British Airways, Lufthansa, retrenching 20,000 workers, retrenching 15,000 workers. Even the Middle East airline, the Gulf carriers are having problems. So aviation is the biggest hit in this COVID-19 pandemic. So we have a lot of things, but how do we rescue the airline? A lot of people have suggested that government should help the airlines by, putting funds into the airline. But you also ask yourself, what specifically are the airlines asking for? What area do the airlines want government to really come in and assist them? And if you look at what we've had before, in 2011, the federal government helped the airline with over 120 billion naira. But what has happened to the airline? We begin to hear a lot of stories. The money didn't come to us. The money went to the banks. The money did this, the money did that. A lot of issues that it even looks as if the money was not well protected, not collateralized. So you begin to look at it that in the past, government had assisted the sector, especially the airlines, but what came out of it? But what we think government should do is that government should assist the airlines in the area of paying salaries, in the area of getting some, not really getting new aircraft, but getting things to work for them for a while. Because if you give the airline money, there's this allegation that most of them divert this money. So government does not really trust the airline. The airline don't really trust the government. So we have a big problem on our hand. But the truth of the matter is that government needs to rescue the airlines, because if the airlines die, a lot of people will be thrown into the labor market. And if you look at it, the effect of that is really, really scary, because if you sack 10 people, there's a possibility that more than 20 people or 30 people who benefit from that 10 people will also be affected. So what do? We won't want to add to the employment, the employment market or the labor market that we have in Nigeria. Already they say Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. So we won't want to add to that. So I think, and a lot of people also think, that government needs to assist the airline, but it's not going to be jamboree. It's not just give them money. It's not just give them money.
Okay, Mr. Shadari, allow me to interject you here. I totally agree with you that there's going to be a multiplier effect if that happens, talking about airline workers losing their jobs. But as Nigeria gets set to wheel up, how do you see air travel in Nigeria? Because in the course of our coverage on TVC News of COVID-19, what we've seen is that some international airlines, where they're using this HEPA care air filter, are likely to deploy. Are we likely to deploy such technology here, where people are able to come on board and the air which they breathe is being filtered and made purer?
Yeah, like I told you, I said I haven't seen what we have on ground to justify why the airports or the airspace should be open.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, it has been proven that the air in the cabin of aircraft cannot lead to the spread of COVID-19. But at the same time, you begin to ask yourself that COVID came into this country via aviation, via movement of people from one place to the other. Like I said, the airlines, the little thing I know that they've done is that they are not going to serve meals on board, especially if it's a short flight. What they will do, maybe before you board your flight, they'll put your packed meal on your seat. So when you come, so you won't have opportunity to go in contact with anybody. So we're going to have a lot of issues on our hands, and I don't know how the airlines are going to do it, but I know that government is monitoring them to ensure that it's either before you board your aircraft, you are fumigated, or you sanitize your hand, and a lot of things. And there was controversy of whether they should leave the middle seat. It has been proven that leaving the middle seat will lead to airfare, because airlines will be losing money, will be burning money. So it has also been suggested that may not work. But what we need to do, we need to be very careful. We need to know what we are doing. We need to be vigilant to ensure that we don't go back to square one.
All right, my final question now in 60 seconds. Let's look at the issue of the impounded UK flag carrier, which was cleared for humanitarian operations, went ahead to fly commercial. They got away with a fine of just 1 million naira. How do you react to this? Please, in 60 seconds.
I think it's something that shocked everybody, because we felt because of the noise the federal government made, especially the minister, that we're not going to accept this, we're not going to do that. But we thought the fine was going to be heavy to serve as deterrent to others. But unfortunately, you can't go beyond what is in the books. You can't go beyond what the penalty is meant for that type of punishment in the books. Is in the books that. So what we need to do is to review our rules, is to review our laws to meet up with the challenges of today, not rules that we just live there for 30 years or 20 years that has been there. We need to review them periodically to meet with the times, to meet with the challenges that we have now. So you can't fault the government and you can't fault the airline. Possibly the airlines saw the loophole there and decided to do that illegal flight into Nigeria and say, oh, if you take it up, you can't find me more than 500,000 naira for one of the offers. So the pilot can, even from his own pocket, bring out the money and pay, and it's free.
Mr. Wole Shadari, this much time can take. Aviation analyst, thank you very much for your time on the show, talking very much about the aviation industry and what we expect as planes and aircraft are ready to